Welcome to Certain Point of View, your first step into a much nerdier world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com. Thanks. And now your hosts, Ben Milton and Addy Thomas.
Hey, Nerf Herders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I am Ben Milton.
Thanks for joining us. Before we get to the episode, just want to remind you that you can go to Patreon and be a part of what we do on the podcast. Ben, tell us a quick, little bit about it.
We hit our first goal, Addy.
Did we
We're
really?
over the $25 mark. Yes.
So what does that do for us right now?
Nothing.
It covers hosting expenses.
It covers a lot of basic expenses for the month for us, which is a huge deal. Because then that frees up some of our own money to continue to do some other things. Like maybe you've noticed the little promos that we've been putting out with the little sound bites, the 1 minute long clips that you can now share on Facebook and Twitter and other social media avenues. We're doing that because now we've freed up a little bit of money. So we're going to continue to grow. Our next big goal is $50 an episode. If you want to tell some people about the show or throw in a couple bucks to the Patreon account, that'd be fantastic. It's all on our website at certainpov.com.
And of course, the podcast is still going to be free, so you can still listen to the podcast. You can still be a part of it. Still love for you to share the podcast with other friends that you think would enjoy the show. Certainpov.com. You can join the discussion there as well. Today we are talking about the X-Men movie universe, and we've got Case with us today.
Hey, Nerf Herders.
Welcome back, dude.
It's been long. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been too long. I've missed you.
Since Rogue One.
Well, I was out of the country for a little bit, so it made sense that I didn't get to see you guys, but I was here in spirit. I was listening to the podcast regularly and, yelling at you on Facebook Messenger. And
You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about.
Man, oh, my God. So I finally listened to the cast you guys did with Nerdly, and I wanted to... It wasn't at you, but I was so mad that you guys brought it up, or that they brought it up, really, which was the stupid... goddamn Nightcrawler retcon where they made him Azazel's son.
Yes.
I hate that story
I don't like
so
that
much.
Yeah.
It's part of the worst run of X-Men ever. And it was
I thought there's been confusion about his origin.
it betrayed everything that had been an
known,
ongoing thing about it. First off, it introduced basically the Wildcats, Cherubim, and Damonite thing into the Marvel universe by having a race of demons and a race of angels. An angel has healing blood and stupid shit like that. And then it also got rid of this whole thing, which was that Nightcrawler is a human being that's cursed to look like a demon. That's his entire character shtick. That he's just by a twist of genetics, he looks ugly and hideous and looks truly terrifying. But he's actually a human, and it's just genetic, it's mutation. By making it I'm an inherited thing, that's a totally different character concept.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I'm not a big fan of that. I like the old school Nightcrawler with his big white gauntlets and big white boots.
And being a swashbuckler and being kind of cocky in the face of it, and but
completely
everyone's hating him.
Completely embracing it.
Getting knocked out and having Doctor Strange being first I thought he was a demon hybrid, but he's actually fully human, just a weird product of mutation. And stuff like that confirmed that he wasn't a demon.
You feel better now?
I feel so much better. I was yelling in the car for my entire drive to work.
We were able to get that out because I don't want that backed
that
up.
was therapy with Case.
Tune in next week.
No, but we want to talk about the X-Men movies.
Yes, we do.
Which, because they've got a weird place in the pantheon of geek culture. Because Blade came out, and then X-Men 1 was the first this is a full superhero team movie that was pretty good and fairly not super faithful, but fairly faithful to the source
Close
material.
enough,
yeah. And has been a franchise still. It's still going. Blade died a decade ago, more than a decade ago.
Yeah.
And it's time to bring him back, frankly.
The Iron Man was a long run into the surge of superhero movies. Spider-Man's on number 3. Spider-Man started after X-Men 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or third
iteration
yeah.
of it. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, and that first one was pretty good. Until the first two were pretty good. The first one was good. The second one was better, and then the third one was just a giant steaming pile of shit.
Yeah.
Damn you, Bryan Singer.
And that was also sort of the beginnings of the sort of these movie cinematic universes as well, because there was also the plan after X3. They were talking about doing these single origin movies. There was talk of a Storm origin movie. We had a
Yeah.
Magneto origin movie, and then we, of course, had a Wolverine origin movie. That was the only
Yeah.
one that happened.
Oh,
and
that was so bad.
truly atrocious. It looked like they ran out of money for effects, like at a clear point.
About 3/4 into the movie, it
And
just
then-
stopped. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like, this is all we can do.
And you had
They
like,
ran out of ideas about 10% into the movie.
Yeah.
Will I Am the Mutant. I still don't know what his powers were.
Don't remember.
He was Maverick.
Was he a
right?
teleporter?
Yeah, he was a teleporter. He was Maverick, right?
I think so.
Yeah, he's a teleporter. Like,
Yeah.
That's why Deadpool could just teleport around.
Oh,
The
that's right,
end.
because he got his power from him. Oh, right. Oh, God, in that terrible version of Deadpool. That
Why
worst.
wasn't Deadpool a blob?
Yeah, you know what? Yeah.
I
There's
hated
so many
everything about
problems
that
with
movie. I
that,
hated
yeah.
everything about that movie.
There were so many problems with that movie. But that movie did so poorly that all their plans for those origin movies got scrapped, and they rolled the Magneto origin movie into First Class.
Right, which I consider the best movie of the series.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
I agree.
Isn't all shared, but like I
Yeah.
think it was the best movie of the series.
I agree.
I actually like Days of Future Past a lot, but I may lean with you that First Class.
I think First Class is a better movie.
Yeah.
Days
I
of
think
Future Past
first-
is not terrible. I think it's overall a good movie, but I think that Matthew Vaughn was just such a better director.
Yeah.
No, that is true. I'll give you that. I like
Yeah.
Matthew Vaughn a lot, and I
Yeah.
wish he had continued with
Yeah.
the X-Men movies. I mean, I love Kingsman. It was so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then, so also along with that, though, we had a solo Wolverine movie,
Which wasn't terrible. I liked it a lot when I saw it in
really
theaters.
liked it.
I liked it.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually watched the director's cut, which I hear
Makes
is
it even better.
I
Yeah.
actually really like the extended cut. I feel it's more of a character story than necessarily a plot.
Yeah,
oriented
and that's kind of
movie.
the thing where it was like, oh, I'm really happy to see Wolverine fight ninjas and also a giant samurai. These are all cool things. It wasn't a great movie altogether, but I was like, I'm okay with having spent money to go see this movie.
Yeah,
It was fun. It was.
I've watched it again since then, and I've enjoyed it. So we've got that, and then of course we've got Deadpool, which shining light in this.
Breakout hit, yeah.
out of nowhere. Yeah.
But I mean, it took a lot of work to get that going, and then of course a lot of that work seems to have been hurt by X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah.
That was a bad movie.
Yeah.
That was back to X3 level bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that
really
was pretty rushed and dumb and dumb. And also,
Yeah, there
also
was-
dumb.
Yeah, it was like, and here's special effects.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Michael Bay made an X-Men movie. Like it was just, and here's special effects. Don't worry about the plot. Don't.
Yeah.
Just
Here's cool stuff.
Here's cool stuff to look at. That's all that matters.
And here's Phoenix again.
Oh.
Again.
I don't ever need to see Phoenix again.
Yeah.
Ever.
What about Rachel Summers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't need to see
Well, what
the. I
about
don't
Scott Summers as the Phoenix?
No.
the Phoenix 5.
No. I'm over the Phoenix.
All right.
I'm over it. It's ridiculous. Like that's kind of my problem with the X-Men, and I said this in the last podcast about Green Lantern, but my problem right now with comic book movies is that we keep rehashing the same old stories that we're all familiar with. And I understand why, is because we're familiar with, we know they're popular, we know that they worked on the comic book page, so let's just adapt that to a movie because we know the story works. I'd like to see some original content. I'd like to see some original thought. Like even Logan, for as great as it looks like it's gonna be, like it's still Old Man Logan.
I don't think so. The Old Man Logan's a very different story than
Yeah.
It like visually it seems
visually
to
it
pull.
less like that. I
But-
guess you're right. Yeah, that's fair.
But
That's
But
like
like Old Man Logan's, I think, the catchier name, but it's a different Wolverine story that it looks like it's pulling more from.
yeah, well, there's because I mean X-23 has no role
in
Yeah.
Old Man,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah,
There's no blind
'cause here's the
Hawkeye
thing.
or
What I
Red
will
Skull.
say to
That we know.
like what I'll say to that is that it's not that they need to have new stories, but I'd like them to be creative and mine stories. I mean, it's such a long history,
Yeah.
and I feel like they only go over maybe the same 4 ideas.
Yes.
Like there's a ton of X-Men material out there that they never utilize in any sort of real way, beyond just being like, oh, we're gonna put a reference to a character name over there, or like. Or that's a cool
Have 'em
power
walking
we can
in the
use it. And,
background,
and that's
yeah.
sometimes a problem with the X-Men movies in general, where like they're like, okay, well, what energy effects haven't we seen? What can we pull those mutants in? Like, and sometimes it works. Like First Class, like they were like, well, we can't use X, X, and X and X like characters. So what characters can we use? Oh, we haven't used these ones. How are they visually interesting? Okay, cool. Well, we can do these things, and we want to do something like this, but we can't use that character. Who else is similar to that? And playing in interesting ways. But oftentimes it's like, well, here's a roster. Let's give each of them a thing that they do, but not necessarily like a character.
Right. Yeah, where it's more emphasized on just the power, the mutant power, rather than the personality, which is what drives X-Men stories.
Right. Well, and they've kind of gotten stuck, I feel, with the original concept for the X-Men, and they've gotten so stuck in sort of that, you know, the Xavier and Magneto relationship, and everything kind of spins out of that with the bulk of 6 movies, really.
Yeah.
That's been the central conflict. You know, Wolverine, you've had a little bit like as bad as Origins is, as Origins, the problem I think with that one is they went back to again like Weapon X again. We've seen
exactly.
Weapon X happen.
All
again.
of these are the same damn stories. Like okay, let's do Phoenix again. Yet they're never going to do the cool, weird stuff of Phoenix. They did the Mark Millar retcon of Phoenix in X-Men 3, and they're like, oh, we screwed that one up. Let's do the same Mark Millar retcon of Phoenix in X-Men, or like an X-Men Apocalypse.
Rather than actually going out to space and, you know.
Can you imagine if they had said, like, okay, so we're doing Apocalypse right now. You know, it'd be really cool. Guardians of the Galaxy was just really popular. What if we introduced the Starjammers in there or something weird? Because like Apocalypse is a big threat theoretically. It could be something that goes out there and does something crazy. Like you could start setting up like the seeds of a Phoenix movie down the road and have it actually involve like the Shi'ar.
Yeah,
Right.
Like
yeah.
Apocalypse could easily be like trying to get the Omicron crystal. Like those all would have been cool and like different from any other X-Men movie we've seen.
Right.
Yeah, but they play it safe.
Yeah,
They play
and
it safe.
They keep it grounded on Earth. They keep it with the same sort of civil rights ish type, you know, conflict with all of these.
Which is good, but they've stopped saying anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, when's the last time one of these X-Men movies has actually had a strong point about the mutant as a metaphor thing?
Right.
First Class had some stuff with going back to the Holocaust thing. It's the same thing already said, but it was like, okay, it's the 60s and it's a little more raw.
Yeah, and I think they got to delve into it a little bit more because you did get to deal with Beast and the look. Like that was something
That was in First Class.
right. I was saying in First
Yeah.
Class they did get to you got to see different characters interact with who they try to figure out who they were. Like the first X-Men movie, you didn't really have that. X2, you didn't you had sort of like this conflict behind the scenes of like, this is a bill that's about to happen and we've got to still protect the senator anyway, Senator Kelly or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the first X-Men movie was a plot that was exactly the TV show, like
Right.
or the most basic X-Men pilot you could write. You know,
Right.
it's like, okay, the world hates and fears us. We also have people who are terrorists on the other side. Well, we have to be not the terrorists, but we also have to like be a shining beacon and fight for our rights and be Martin Luther King Jr. instead of Malcolm X. Like
Right.
that whole scenario.
But
Like,
I guess my point is with First Class, they did get a chance to you had characters who with Beast especially, you had a character who didn't like what he looked like, and you had other characters who were proud of who they were, and then just kind of
Yeah, it was more character driven.
Yeah.
It was more that was the most character driven one of the pieces, and that's why I think it works the best for an X-Men movie.
And I think some of that does kind of carry over into Days of Future Past to an extent.
Yeah,
maybe not fully developed, but
yeah, I think Bryan Singer just didn't handle it as well as Matthew Vaughn would have. Like Bryan Singer, because we all argue that him leaving X-Men is why X3 fell apart.
yeah, that script is still bad.
I think there's some good in there. Like there's some ideas going on. Like they want to cure us. Like you could make arguments about conversion therapy and like Bryan Singer. I don't feel like this is me putting what I know about him and his concepts of life and his who he is. His personal life onto the movie. But he tends to use it as a homosexual metaphor versus a race metaphor.
Right.
And I think that was the difference with First Class versus the others where. The introduction of Rogue was her first sexual encounter. She strips a person of their life, there seems to be a lot of X2 has the famous scene where it's have you tried not being a mutant? Those are him using those metaphors, and that was probably a little more acceptable at the time when X2 was coming out because I think there's the argument in the 80s and 90s we sort of forgot that racism exists in pop culture. It didn't, but people have argued that's with like the Cosby Show and stuff like that. And so into the early 2000s, I think the issue they wanted to push, or that we were pushing and like getting out into the world, was the idea of like gay rights versus racial issues.
Right.
And that, it wasn't a choice and all that.
Right. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's the beauty of storytelling, is that you can, attach different ideas and ideologies behind it to tell a story or to tell your point of view without just berating somebody. That's totally okay. The problem, I don't have a problem with that. The problem that I have is when you don't tell a good story.
Yeah.
You don't have good characters and stuff like that. And
that's
what
X-Men
these
3 didn't have good characters. They introduced Jamie Madrox just to be like, well, we want a scene where someone disappears and looks like there's a lot of people. And like they had the Juggernaut just so they can use an internet meme.
Yeah.
And it was all this stupid stuff that was going in there that Bryan Singer, I think, would have made a better movie than what Brett Ratner had made. But
that's like saying 1 is greater than 0, but like, yeah, it would have been better.
Well, but
Brett Ratner
I think he would have done cool
kind
stuff with like they want to cure us. It's not a disease. Like all these concepts were in there that were foundation points that he had laid. Like he also wanted to do the Phoenix story, and then maybe if he had gotten to do it the one time, we wouldn't have him trying to do it again 6 movies later.
That's fair. Yeah. I guess that I just feel like that Phoenix story was just so.
They're both shoehorned in.
Yeah.
Well, at least that one, they had 3 movies with her. This, like now, it's like, oh, we're going to just introduce her as a teenager, and she's becoming the Phoenix.
Right away, yeah.
She's coming out. Right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't work. So, the X-Men, I don't want to get bogged down with what's wrong with the X-Men. I want to talk about
like what we can, like what to look
for, or what are we looking forward to? Because there is some good stuff on the horizon
Deadpool
too. Deadpool 2 is coming out.
Legion, the TV series,
the TV show looks
really cool. That really, and very different.
Yes, and not tied to the rest of the X-Men universe. They've said specifically that this one is standalone show. It's not tied to anything else, so they can get as weird and as wonky as they want to without having to play and mess in the sandbox with anybody else, which is great for that character. I think that's really smart. And then you also have a new X-Men TV show on the horizon that's in development.
Yeah, that was just announced today. Well, it had been talking about, but it was confirmed today.
Confirmed that they'll get a pilot. So.
Which sounds fascinating. I'm curious to see what they'll do with that, because I think the X-Men actually work better on TV than they do in a movie. So I mean, there's like the mutant universe is prime for good things to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about universe. That's a good phrase to bring up, because I've said this before on the podcast that I think the X-Men franchise is robust enough that it doesn't need to exist in the same universe as anyone else, and I think it actually is kind of contradictory to work in a universe with other characters. Like I think the Fantastic Four and the X-Men and the Avengers all together makes you wonder, why does the world hate and fear the mutants but not the other guys? Like,
right.
Like there to a certain point where you're like, well, the giant rock monster is a celebrity. Why? What's going on here? Like, like the pretty redhead who can move stuff with her mind is hated and feared, and everyone's terrified of her, as well as like the statuesque model who can control the weather. But the statuesque male model who can control the weather everyone's cool with that, even though he like is sacrilegious to a good chunk of the country. It's I think the X-Men franchise works really well when it's its own unique thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even have some superhumans in there, but as long
it needs limited contact.
Yeah, all part of the world of like anyone who has superpowers is terrifying. So for the most part, they're mutants, and then maybe like some Alpha Flight characters or something like that. But I don't really think we need to do what Spider-Man's doing, for example, and tie it in to the Marvel universe, no matter how successful it's been. So I think I'd like them to stay away from that scenario. So I want them to do well, and I don't want them to like make a deal with Marvel.
Well, there's a wealth of characters and stories that you could get to without having to like suddenly like accommodate the schedule of the rest of the Marvel movies. I think there's some benefit to the competition with Marvel.
Yes.
And I think actually they were sort of on the right path. They just had one early misstep that really kind of derailed a lot of their plans. And I think they do need to start out with solo movies. I would like to see I'd like to see solo movies for characters that haven't necessarily been fleshed out. I'd like to stay away from Xavier for a little bit. Let Xavier be a little bit more like a Nick Fury that, kind of shows up a little bit later. or maybe even use someone else to do that. Maybe even go for the Mutant Brotherhood to kind of start off things. But you know, after you get some, but after you get some individual movies, you know, I know the plans are still out there, and it's like it's been in like development limbo, but there's still a Gambit movie.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. The thing is, Channing Tatum is spearheading that one, and
I think he's left it now.
Again, the thing I looked at today still said he's
still attached to it.
But again, he could.
Well, I know Doug Liman,
but I know he was
left
really. He was.
You know
really
who I'd cast as Gambit? Clive Owen.
Clive Owen. Oh, Jesus Christ. Just stop. Just stop.
I mean, you know who I'd cast as Gambit? No one.
Is that because you don't like Gambit, or because
I don't hate Gambit? But I think that he.
What if it was a Gambit and Rogue movie? So it's more than just him.
You'd have to do a cool spin on Rogue for me right now, because I liked the version that Anna Paquin did in the first 3 movies, but
Really?
I feel like I'm okay with no more Rogue for a little while.
See,
Like,
but that's so different from the Rogue that I love from the animated series.
well, the animated series and the comics,
Yeah.
but that Rogue. I mean, it's fun because like, do you think they're ever going to do a Rogue again? Well, I start to say that, and then I immediately think of a counterexample. But so Rogue was a supervillain initially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She absorbed the mind of a superhero, which they're never going to do in a show.
You can't bring Captain Marvel.
Even
Miss
if it was someone
Marvel,
different,
yeah.
like it could, because like in Age of Apocalypse, she actually absorbed the powers from Lorna Dane. And so even though she had the same powers for some reason, that she was super strong, nigh invulnerable, and could fly, it was all magnetism.
Right.
That was like their explanation for it. So then she was like schizophrenic for a while, and Xavier was like counseling her while she had a different person in her mind. And sometimes she would just think she was Carol Danvers and would go off and like try to be Carol Danvers. And then they'd be like, "You're not, you're Rogue." And she's like, "What? No, wait, I'm a brunette with a white streak. What's going on?" Like,
how did this happen?
yeah. And it led to a very cool character. And, you know, like Miss Marvel's powers are basically made her the Superman of the team for a while. That's all cool. And then they try to do the stuff where I can recall any power I ever had at some point.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't like it
power.
either.
Yeah.
But I was cool with her. Like, she touched someone so deeply that she had that power permanently.
Yeah.
I was fine with that scenario. And yeah, that was cool for the comic or for the cartoon. They never explained how she had her powers like that. They were just like, oh, she can touch people, and also this. But the Anna Paquin movie version I thought was fine. Like she clearly didn't want to do it after the second movie, and got super detached from it. But the first 2 movies, I dug that component, and like I said, that was a cool way of introducing why people should be afraid of mutants. Where like this teenage girl, without even being able to control it, like on her first time, like just touching a boy, like activates her powers, and that's like so freaky and whatnot. So that was cool, and you'd have to like pitch a really cool Rogue idea for me to be excited about Rogue.
See, now I'd like to see Rogue. Maybe Rogue is a Phase 2 movie. You know, let's say we're comparing this to the Marvel model for the MCU. But I'd like to see her start out with the Mutant Brotherhood instead of Xavier the X-Men.
What if they introduced Rogue and she absorbed Jean Grey's powers
and became the Phoenix.
Didn't become Phoenix, but became the power set that she had. Well, like the same way Hellion or like the Con-El Superboy, like the 90s Superboy, where it's all just telekinesis, but it's like controlled around your body.
Yeah.
Like maybe that was the scenario for her. And then that's how they take a villain in an earlier movie who then becomes a lead in a later movie.
The hero.
And that way you can still have some of your Jean Grey stuff and whatnot, but you can get rid of Sophie Turner, who looks the part, but
is a lousy
has no
actress.
I
mean,
charisma.
I don't want to completely
for that role.
Yeah, I don't want to completely
Not
like shit on her because I have praised her before, but like,
But there's no charisma to her in that movie. Like
there's no charisma for a lot of people in that movie. It's
Yeah.
I just want to get away from that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't like that cast. I didn't like the
Yeah.
new cast. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Totally didn't work.
Which is also kind of weird because like they made a big like deal with Jubilee in the promotions, and she was like nowhere after the mall.
Yeah.
There's so many
She's
problems.
also a teenager in every movie, and she's a vampire in modern Marvel comics.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Maybe
Jubilee's
she's always been a vampire.
So here's
She's a
what,
mall bat.
Kevin Smith's remake. I agree with you, Addy. I would. There's a little too much Professor X Magneto going on for me.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about this idea in the past of like just how screwed up Xavier is and some of the things that he does,
Yeah.
or wiping people's memories and retconning his own ideas of what happened and stuff like that
Yeah.
because he's so powerful. I would like to see them kind of play with that a little bit.
Right. A darker Professor X would be interesting.
Like where there was an original X-Men team that he failed with.
Yep.
That would include Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Angel,
Yeah.
and Thunderbird.
Bring the original team, like the original team, back that way, in like
yeah.
for your Phase 2 event movie.
And well, those would be flashbacks
Yeah.
of his failure with, and then he's got this new team, and my new team would be Colossus, Nightcrawler, Gambit, Rogue, and Emma Frost.
Nice.
Because I like that combination
Yeah.
of characters.
I'd still add Kitty Pryde to that mix. That's
because you're such a fan of the Joss Whedon run.
Yeah, I am.
Well, I
But
mean, what you're saying sounds a lot like the giant size X-Men relaunch, just with a few characters swapped out. But like that's where like the Colossus, Wolverine, all like what we think of as the classic X-Men were really first introduced. Where it was just like, well, because you got to remember like. The 60s X-Men team was basically just Marvel throwing a lot of mud on the wall to see what would stick. And X-Men didn't stick. They like were able to like survive for a while, but then they just went into reprints for a while.
Yeah.
So I forget what the run, it was like 5 years or something where there wasn't like new X-Men material coming out. And then that's when they did the relaunch with giant size X-Men in the 70s and just totally like
Retconned everything.
Yeah, totally changed the concept of the show of the comic.
Right. So yeah, I would do that, and I would leave Magneto out of it. I would say like maybe Magneto is the one who beat the original team.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why you introduce them later on. Like, I'd actually like to make something that kind of brings the team together, like something like the Marauders or the Purifiers.
Yeah, I was going to say use Stryker and the Purifiers as your
Yeah.
first enemy. Like that way you establish the whole like fear between the humans and the mutants.
Without necessarily being there in like a mutant registration act or a
before
big
you,
political.
before you go right to Trask and the Sentinels and stuff like that. Like ramp that up.
Right.
So that it makes sense.
You know, it'd be really interesting if they went with a version of the original X Factor concept, where it was the original team, both pretending to be like a government task force hunting down mutants, but at the same time actually being heroes trying to prevent like serious calamity. What if they were actually like fully converted into like a government task force? They thought they were doing like the greater good of like bringing mutants in, and like Xavier's like, how did I go so astray with these people that have gone like completely off the rails and now are like hunting down their own kind, and like, but make them very much like they think what they're doing is right. Hardcore.
They don't know that
and
they're
so
putting
the
them in.
opening arc is like Xavier having to like rescue people secretly from his own former students, and then like and setting up like a new like
That's really
a new kind of
cool.
concept with like he finds this like poor Russian boy who like can turn into steel, and and like this like
Right. And then
or we do
slowly-
a newer
slowly
roster, but
Right, and slowly builds his team out of that.
yeah, I mean, I'd love New Mutants actually. Like, I know that name gets thrown around a lot. I wouldn't go with the name itself, but like I love their team.
Yeah.
They have like a lot of
Is
really
that
cool
Armor
members.
is on that one, the Japanese girl, or is that another one that I'm thinking of?
Wasn't
Armor?
Bishop on New Mutants?
No. Like I was talking about like the Danny Moonstone, Cannonball, Wolfsbane, Karma.
Okay.
Like that roster there.
Okay.
Doug Ramsey and Warlock, like that was a fun group of like pretty easygoing, like we're learning and also like having our adventures. I love Sunspot. Sunspot's one of my favorite characters in the Marvel U.
Yeah.
Total like Marvel U, not just the X-Men lore. Like that would be a cool roster, and they all have some visually interesting dynamic powers. Like Sunspot, like they used him in the most recent one, but like he's not the Human Torch. Like,
Right.
like people forget that part. He's not the Human Torch. Like, and but you don't have to even like hold it to any one roster. There's so many cool rosters.
Yeah,
out
that's
there.
the thing. Is
And
that there's
you can change it
so many
out.
fun characters.
Yeah.
But like maybe have older school X-Men characters being like a splinter group, and then we're focusing on a new group that needs to be formed and actually like live up to the standard of, well, it's the world is afraid of us, and maybe we need to be in hiding, which could be kind of fun.
Well, so do you think we should do some individual movies before you get to that introducing, Xavier is more of a Nick Fury,
I
controversial,
think that's
darker
that's
past.
a way to go.
Yeah.
It's not a wrong way.
Yeah.
Or a right way.
do you think- do you-
But which
way to
characters
go.
would you do? Because like the thing is,
do you think you have enough material for a Nightcrawler movie? Is it too
sure.
obscure? Or
For sure you could do it. For sure you could do it. He's had his own runs. Of course you could do it. If you, it's tell a good story.
you could. I mean, I'm just wondering which ones would be cool movies on their own, which would just be generic superhero movies, and then where like they all fly. Because
let's say you have Nightcrawler dealing with the Purifiers, especially because of like again going back to sort of his
And the
we talked-
circus roots and stuff like that.
Right.
Like that could be a lot of fun.
But imagine the trailer you make off of that movie before we like get into really like.
Oh, that's
could you
true.
make a good movie? Imagine the trailer that you would cut to show it, and try to embrace like the superhero tropes that go into it. And like I know we don't want to be like, oh well, it's generic, but like how does the public get introduced to this movie if they don't know who Nightcrawler is and like really come to understand it? Like the 2008 Iron Man movie did a really good job of like setting up Tony Stark as being like a worthwhile character to watch the movie for, even though Iron Man was not in the public consciousness the way Batman or Superman is.
Right.
And to a certain extent, like some of these like generic superhero movie trailers kind of get annoying, and we have to set up the same story arc every time. But it is a way for us to like explore ideas and set up character concepts and introduce a huge cinematic universe that way. And I don't know if you can do that with Nightcrawler necessarily.
I think you can. I think there's plenty.
Or if it would be interesting enough without. I don't know.
I definitely think so. I think
absolutely.
there's plenty of like money action shots you can do with that, along with like let's just say it's like you use the VO for the trailer is just him in prayer in confession or something. You know, like
you could do a really good drama with him. You could do a really good action drama with that character. For sure.
I mean, maybe. I'm not.
No, maybe. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a good character. That is a complex character. And that's all you really need. You need a complex character and you need a good plot.
Hold on. Let's try and think about characters who are a little different than what we've seen, though. Because, like, Nightcrawler has one of the most famous scenes in all the X-Men movies.
That's true.
Period.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
so, like, sure, you could do some cool Nightcrawler
Emma
stuff,
Frost. We only saw her a little bit in First Class.
They haven't done her
And it wasn't really very well.
I also did her in Wolverine Origins.
Right.
And also not really well.
So bad.
so.
Yeah, so I would do. You could do an Emma Frost movie. You could totally do an Emma Frost movie.
That's what I'm trying to see. Can you pitch a sort of
pitch the basic idea.
Emma is a spy for Britain or what? She's MI. So it's basically a spy movie with superpowers.
telepath?
I don't know. I mean, like the thing is, I always like to think of Emma Frost as a reformed villain, and I don't.
Right. So all right. So
Wanna
you have
write-
her as a Russian spy.
So basically, we're getting
So it's just a Black Widow movie?
or an American spy.
So we're
depending
getting
on
the Black Widow movie we never got.
It's
Yeah.
like we don't want to make a movie driven by a female superhero, but what if we made her whiter?
You know what? We may need to move away from an Emma Frost solo movie.
That feels good under a Trump regime. It feels good to me. It feels really good. Give her a red hat and just send her out. It'll be awesome. It'll work.
Make mutants great again.
No, I like her superpowers. I like
I like the conflict with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
her doing bad things and trying to like come to terms with it, so that at the end of the movie where she's like kind of like over all the stuff that she's done.
I kind of, if you mentioning the Russians, like let's say she's working for the Russians, she doesn't have to be Russian. Like maybe she has to, maybe she's trying to find a particular mutant that can, what's his, were you gonna say something?
I got a totally different spin, or like it's a different direction, but like this one might work really well. Okay, so what if they start with a fairly obscure character, and do a totally different type of movie, and don't even pitch it as a superhero movie, or like an X-Men related movie? Like I'm thinking Wolfsbane at the moment, because like what if you just do a really crazy werewolf movie? And at the very end, you realize, like, oh, it's part of the X-Men universe. Like, start setting up... Like, you could do a movie like Carrie, for example, with so many characters.
Kind of like the new
X-Men team.
Shyamalan movie.
Is that Split? Is that the one you're talking...
Don't spoil it. I've been advised to go see it, and I don't want it ruined.
I've heard it's good, but that's the only thing I know.
It's connected to another one. Let's just say that.
Oh, is it connected? Oh, well, now I can guess. But okay. All right, cool. Okay, cool.
There's only one that
there's only one that you could possibly be talking about. Okay, but yeah.
This time there is no spoilers on this
It's so
damn
weird
episode.
that you're so
I really want to see
scared
this movie, and I don't want to have it ruined for me. I really want to be surprised.
Ned Stark dies in episode 9 of the first season.
Motherfucker.
There's a second Death Star, by the way.
And it's fully operational.
I hate you guys so much.
You might
right
even
now.
say that it is a trap.
All right, I see. Okay.
Okay, but no, like do like really weird movies that like somehow tie in. Like, you know, you can do all these like supernatural tropes and do it. Because you could do, like I mentioned the Starjammers before. What if you did something like a space opera that looks like any, like with the Shi'ar universe, and then you reveal like, oh, it actually does tie into the Phoenix story.
Yeah, I think what's key is I actually want this franchise to go out to space.
You want
You know?
every franchise to go out to space right now.
I mean,
You were like, Green Lantern needs to go out to space.
Green Lantern is an intergalactic space cop. He should be out in space.
Hey, man.
That's kind of key.
hey man, he is a train engineer to me always.
It's like, I mean,
Hashtag OG.
the Green Lantern headquarters aren't even on Earth, Ben. Like, that makes sense.
No, but I mean, like seriously, like Guardians of the Galaxy proved that you could do this crazy thing, and I'm betting you Fox was kicking themselves that they're like, oh,
Here's the problem with that idea. Just because Guardians was successful with it doesn't mean that you can pull it off every fucking time.
No, I agree.
No,
Because
of
what I'm
course
about
not.
to say is that like I bet Fox is kicking themselves that they weren't like, because that like, oh, we should have done Starjammers as the Guardians of the Galaxy movie to tie into the like Phoenix lore, because that's basically what Guardians of the Galaxy is.
Yeah.
Where it's like we got a team of rogues running around out there with galactic thing that eventually is going to unite the Earth heroes. Like that's exactly what the
X-Men
70s
have the
story
rights
was.
to King right now.
I will. What?
I
Kang
believe
the Conqueror?
they have the.
What in the name of high holy? Why?
I know, right?
Wait, how is that tied in?
That right now,
That's what
Fox,
got sold with it, man.
Yeah, Fox
Came
has
with
the
it,
rights to Kang the Conqueror.
Who?
They've got
that?
they've got the Shi'ar, they've got the Badoon because James Gunn wanted to use the Badoon.
I can understand that one to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
like, wait, but Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah, and he's mostly an Avengers.
Wait,
villain.
is it by way of Ramses?
I
I don't know how he got
Ramses or
lumped in.
Ramatet, whatever the
I
his
don't
like.
know how he got lumped in, but
Well,
he did.
because he was a Fantastic Four villain first, because they tied together all those identical of like time traveling villains as being just different phases of the same person's life.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It was initially introduced as a Fantastic Four villain, and then he was an Avengers villain, but then he was a different Avengers villain, and then like he's a Squadron Supreme villain from a different reality. Like, you know,
because it's comic books.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so they have the rights to a good villain to use.
Yeah.
You know, again, like X Factor, I think is an important franchise to go with.
Oh, X Factor would be
Obviously,
fantastic.
Continuing to do Deadpool movies.
Yeah, actually, I will say if they did like the Peter David, not his big run on X Factor, but his more recent one where they're like private eyes in a world of mutants, that would be so.
That would be really cool. That would make a
you-
great TV show.
Actually,
though.
you start with Madrox as like a movie. If you want to do a standalone movie, that's a really good standalone movie.
Yeah.
like because then it's a detective story, and you could do some cool stuff with it.
Make
and
a
his
better
powers are
TV
really
show, though.
different.
Make such a better TV show.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, all these would have been great TV shows. Like, all this Wolverine stuff would have been like out of our system by now if it was just a TV show. I don't know, man. Like, but yeah, like Madrox would be a really cool thing to do like open up this world. Yeah. Just do weird, different stuff. And that's the thing that Marvel has been doing that I'm not sure what the pitch is, because X-Men so commonly are just, here's my power and maybe here's my personality quirk on this team. But so many X-Men don't really have standalone origins beyond just like this is their backstory, as opposed to like this is their origin story, like because their powers are innate and they're, you know.
And when
like,
they turn 15, then it popped
yeah,
out.
roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what would be the Beast movie where it's just like young Hank McCoy is like, he's a football star and he's got big feet.
It's a beautiful mind with Beast.
It's a beautiful mind. That would be the best. a blue, hairy, beautiful mind.
You just,
it's like a beautiful mind.
You just
made by
re-release a beautiful mind with Russell Crowe painted blue.
It's just a beautiful mind with like done by Sesame Street. Be the best. I would watch that movie all day long.
Well, you would need a Hank McCoy that's like rhyming or like quoting Shakespeare the way he does in the animated series.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's the best Hank McCoy. Like this Hank McCoy is dull.
Emo Hank.
Yeah, I don't like this Hank McCoy. I don't like
In
this
the current
beast.
movies, yeah.
I just don't like this beast. Like he's just doofy.
I thought
I
you
didn't like they were
him
like, let's have meds so that we can have him just not be Beast. I'm like, wait, hold on.
what the hell is that? Like,
Well,
why-
he's done that at times, hasn't he?
Yeah, but
He's always
so is the
looking for a
thing.
cure,
Like you're not
but-
going to do like a Fantastic Four movie where the thing can just at
yeah,
will
no,
turn
yeah.
off his powers. Like, sure, they've done that stretch, and Nightcrawler's also had a hologram projector that makes him look human. Like, but that's such a
very
cop
weird.
out for like the actual.
That was a bad
movie.
one because that was the which cartoon was that?
No, because that was in the cartoon, yes, but it was
in the
established
comics
super early in Marvel canon. Nightcrawler also has the power to go invisible when he's in shadows, but like they never talk about that one anymore
Right.
too.
Oh,
Like,
right.
But yeah, he had that, and they didn't explain it when they first showed up, or when he first showed up with it. It was like an issue later where he's like, by the way, I have a hologram projector here. It was just this weird, sketchy dude with a mustache walking around with Wolverine.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, oh, it's actually turn off your hologram. Oh, I'm back to being Nightcrawler.
Yeah, that was weird. That was really weird.
And then he used it to beat like the Shi'ar equivalent, or the character was called Hobgoblin, but he was like the Shi'ar Imperial Guard is the Legion of Superheroes, just like with a different coat of paint. Like that's all of them are. And so there was a character who's just Chameleon, and so like he like turns into a monster, and Nightcrawler's like, man, that's a scary monster. I bet I can turn into something scarier. And he like fiddles with his like little like human disguise kit and turns into a giant monster, and like the guy just runs away. It's just like, it worked. My holograms.
Wow.
I'll load that up on my USB drive.
Yeah,
I
like,
just happen to have this.
Yeah, he just happened to have it, and like the super advanced alien race of like spacefaring like superheroes didn't know about holograms.
It could happen. It could happen.
I
talking about
I would
comics.
believe more likely that like he had like a like a sliver of Professor X's powers. Like somehow Professor X had like created a Cerebro belt that like makes whoever like is looking at you appear the way you want them to think you look or something. I would have bought that more than what they did.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's been plenty of plot holes in this series, in the books,
Oh,
and
yeah,
the movies.
absolutely.
I mean,
yeah,
it's
and
just,
all of them. And especially when you introduce time travel into the series.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what
Just
actually would be
crazy.
fun? They can't do it, but it would be so much fun. It's not time travel, but reality travel. Because one of my favorite X-Men series ever was Exiles, which was sliders with superheroes. Where the original pitch of it, they wanted to take Blink from Age of Apocalypse, who died with everyone else when at the end of
In
Age
the
of
future
Apocalypse.
timeline, yeah.
Well, in the original Age of Apocalypse timeline, before they did the second wave of comics a decade later, there was a bunch of bombs that were in the air, and the issue ends right before they all hit. It was they were all being nuked, so she would have died with everyone else. So they wanted to save her, so they they created this setup where they pulled her out of reality and then twists on on all these different superheroes and pulled them onto a team of 6 and then sent them from reality to reality, fixing little problems that were going to cause ripples in the timeline. And just kept on moving around, and there was this greater mystery of what's this force doing, how it was communicating with them through this weird avatar, and they were trying to figure out what was going on, but it seemed to be that they were doing good work, and then they found out there was a Wetworks version of the same team, doing when they had to do an assassination, and every reality they went to was a cool twist on things, and it was great. It was Judd Winnick's best comic ever. I haven't read his the Pedro comic, but in terms of superhero lore, it was his best comic ever because it was just I'm going to look at the entire Marvel history and figure out what twists I want to make on any random story. And it didn't matter about continuity. You didn't need to do anything like that. You could just have a group of people who were separated from their friends and family, constantly being forced to look at weird perversions of everything they knew. And it was such a fun story, but they could never do it. Ultimately, it was revealed it was Kang.
Of course.
I'm not joking.
Kang.
Like, yeah.
Oh, see, Kang's the big bad, the big bad at the end of all of this.
Actually, the big good in this scenario.
Oh, right.
And also the big bad. It got so weird. They had to like explain that everything that they thought they knew was true. Not only was it sometimes true, but it was sometimes false because the nature of time travel and reality warping kept on shifting the way things occurred. But they had, like, for example, one of the coolest moments with a Superman type character. Because that Wetworks team, the running thing for them every time they showed up, their roster almost was completely different every time because they were just go into these super lethal situations. So finally, a team happens where they lose one member. I think it was a version of Colossus. And so their new member was Hyperion, and a very evil version of Hyperion. And for listeners who don't know, Hyperion is Marvel's like analog for Superman.
But mentally unbalanced.
Sometimes not. Several Hyperions have been very good and like truly like awesome superheroes. But so this version decides that the world is about to end because Magneto is causing an asteroid to come from asteroid M to like destroy all life. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to stop the asteroid and I'm just going to chill out on this world. This could be good. I think I dig it. So he like confronts Magneto, and like Magneto is like, how dare you confront me? I will freeze the iron in your blood. And it's like, I'm not from your world. I'm not from any world, and I have no iron in my blood. And he like smashes Magneto's head in with his fist, and then tries to like burn out the asteroid with his eyes, and fails. And they move to the next world where he kills the Fantastic Four immediately, and the Exiles finally are brought into this reality to fix the problem. And so the leader of that Wetworks team, he betrayed. He burned off the arm of that version of Gambit. That guy was in hiding for like 2 months while this Hyperion like took over this world. Exiles show up. Gambit joins up with them, and they have to go and fight Hyperion. And he whoops their ass real bad until ultimately he's about to incinerate Blink. With his eyes, where she creates one of her like blink portals, gets his eye beam, has him shoot himself directly in the back, creating just enough of a hole that Gambit takes his staff and jams it inside of him, and then triggers the explosion that blows up the whole thing. Like they did.
That's graphic.
Jesus.
Like,
All right, calm down, Ben.
I'm just thinking, like, would I let my kid read this? Yes.
it was
Yes, I would.
and like Gambit's words as he like jabs the staff in are like, "I will see you soon, Storm." Like, because that version of Gambit.
Oh, see, there you go. See,
But it was
a little bit of heart there at the end.
No, it was the whole run had some really cool stuff, and then eventually it kind of fell apart when like shifted it from writer to writer. But it had a really cool premise. Like they did a really cool version of Thunderbird, it was Warpath that went with or like came with him off the reservation, and that version of Thunderbird survived his mission, but Warpath died. And so he quits the X-Men and is like this like wandering alcoholic for a few years before Apocalypse finds him.
racist.
So racist.
You know,
I love that you thought that too. Because that's exactly.
You know what? I'm gonna actually stop.
You were going to say off the reservation was a metaphor or literally?
You know what? I'm gonna stop and note that actually I don't remember if for a fact if he was an alcoholic. I know he was like in a depressive funk, and that actually may have been my inference right there. So I don't mean that, but he was in this depressive funk and he was filled with rage and hate and like his brother died. When Apocalypse finds him and makes him War.
Oh, okay.
And so when we are introduced to this version of Thunderbird, he has freed himself from Apocalypse, but he's now this like weird cybernetic creature that eventually gets into a fight with the Hulk where he wins. Because he just loses himself in war. He's got no sense of taste. He's like totally like distorted into this weird monster, but he has a great sense of smell, so he loves to just like go and smell flowers. And like it's this really it's this really interesting like character. He's like they even joke about him being like Ferdinand the Bull. And like that's where they introduced Nocturne, Nightcrawler's daughter from an alternate timeline with Scarlet Witch. And who later became part of the mainstream X-Men. But she was like,
Did he have you would have to wear the belt for that, like, and put on the hologram for that to happen, right? Like that didn't just like.
Well, I mean,
She
it's
wasn't
Scarlet
like-
Witch.
Scarlet
Like that,
Witch.
she grew up with gypsies. He grew up with gypsies. They were like, okay,
He's
that
still
kinda
blue
works.
and has
They
a
got
tail.
stuff to talk about.
Well, and his daughter is blue and has a tail too.
Some
He
people
got
could
3
be into the
fingers.
tail. Some people could be into the tail.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. A little extra something.
Ultimately, Thunderbird was into the tail with Nocturne. So
All
That does make sense.
Yeah.
All right, I'm in.
Yeah.
Never mind.
And well,
I'll allow it.
Well, and they had a version of Mimic who was a superhero, and his whole story arc was him becoming he started off as being like the greatest hero of his world, and as they go from world to world to world, like the first mission, Professor Xavier's the evil one and Magneto's the good one, and so they like find Xavier, and Xavier just goes around murdering people with his mind powers, and he's forced to kill his own mentor, and like every world after that, he's like is confronted by friend after friend after friend who's just twisted and perverse, and he just becomes more and more depressed over the course of it until he like just finally just can't take it anymore. He starts to have like a breakdown, and like it's a cool arc of characters, like where they like show what you can do as you take what you know and then pervert it. And at this point with X-Men movies, we've seen so much of it. I feel like the audience could be familiar enough with it that maybe you could do it.
Yeah, but you
probably
would
not. Like you really can't.
You
Like,
can't
but-
because you would have to pervert Wolverine, Jean Grey, and Cyclops, and that's it. Or
Yeah.
Professor, or Mystique.
Yeah, ultimately.
Yeah, and that's as far as you go, which would be fine. I mean, that's like 5-6 movies, but it wouldn't work.
No,
Wouldn't
but it
work.
would have been fun.
It would be a lot of fun. It would be a lot of fun. I'll tell you who I want to see, and I know this sounds really crazy. Dupe. I really want to see something with Dupe in it. We need a Dupe movie.
Who would he be played by? Clive Owen?
You know, it could be voiced by Clive Owen, you asshole. No, I would cast
Gilbert Gottfried?
Yes. Yes. That would be fantastic. That's good casting, Addy. I like that one.
Thank you.
Yeah. You don't like Dupe?
A whole movie? I don't know.
No, but like if he's with other people.
Oh, no, yeah, that's fine.
If he's
That's
on the
fine.
team?
But in that case, we also need Squirrel Girl.
Oh, yes.
Well,
Yes.
she's got to be with like the main Marvel stuff, right?
Oh, that's true. I think now that she's an Inhuman, she's back with Marvel.
Since they've retconned her to being inhuman.
Yeah,
instead
she's
of a
no
mutant.
longer a mutant.
That's unfortunate. Because
Yeah.
she would be a great mutant. Was a great mutant.
Yeah.
The unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
She's taking down everybody.
Sounds a lot dirtier than I think you meant it to.
I don't know, maybe.
I mean, you know, if what's her name can be into Nightcrawler's tail, hey,
Yeah,
why not
exactly,
somebody
and
being
Nocturnes.
into why not be into Squirrel Girl's bushy tail?
This really got
Oh,
derailed
this is
from our
going weird.
plans for the
Okay.
X-Men movie universe. Wow. This
Tell
just
me
all
you
of a
never
sudden
thought
became
about
the
it. Tell me
X-Men
you
porn
never
universe.
thought about it.
Well, I'm sorry, but when
Wait, isn't there one?
When
I'm positive. I'm positive there
I'm
is.
sorry, but when there were all those rumors or all those fan creations of Anna Kendrick as Squirrel Girl, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, that's right. See?
Oh wow. Okay, we're there.
I'd like to apologize to Miss Kendrick now if she ever gets to see this or listen to this. That was not me. That was Addy.
Yeah, whatever. You say much worse.
I did. I said horrible things about Candace Patton.
So, all right.
Yeah, all right,
So,
well.
what are there any other characters? Are there any other like big events? Like, what would be sort of? So, you know, we've talked about the Purifiers, the Marauders. We've talked about Xavier kind of betraying his original team and them coming back. We've talked about Starjammers, the Shi'ar.
Yeah,
Like,
we
are
touched
there
on Age
other-
of Apocalypse, which would be especially difficult now.
Yeah, you got to give that a good decade before you try that again.
It was a great story when it happened. It like my
now, of
way
course,
too
you're-
long tangent about Exiles.
Now, you're of
is-
course talking about Age of Apocalypse as far as the alternate reality where.
yes, where
as opposed to
where
another
Legion
coming
kills
that-
Professor X.
Right, right.
Yeah, that whole reality. But that was also cool because it was a good chance to twist things, and ultimately it was kind of the same sort of feel of things as like Days of Future Past, which
Right.
yeah.
Well, let's say this. It's, so obviously we've had, Apocalypse was completely mishandled. What would we do to use him properly? I've said several times before, I'm not necessarily a fan of a character like him, like the Thanos and Darkseid type characters are a little too out there and unrelatable and, but so much larger than life. But there is a way to make them work because they are popular characters. There's something in there that people do like. It's just something I don't personally connect with? What do you think is sort of necessary to make a character like that work?
For Apocalypse?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always thought that Apocalypse was the weakest of that sort of group of godlike villain characters, like the Thanos, the Darkseid,
Right.
the Mongol. In part because he's earthbound in a way that the other ones aren't, and that I feel like he doesn't fit the X-Men franchise as well. I think the only time he worked really well at all was the Age of Apocalypse, because he was this unstoppable force that took over the world. Like, he actually won, and that made sense, because they're like, how threatening is he if we can beat him in those scenarios? Like, they have to justify it with Thanos to a certain degree. Usually it's him defeating himself. Darkseid already rules a world, so him not winning here kind of works, because this would already be an expansion.
He's still a threat.
Yeah. Mongol also had his own world, and usually he's fighting Superman, so you kind of understand it.
Right.
So Apocalypse is always difficult to do, and I think
You
it
think
is
it's
actually
just better to avoid him?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think he really only worked when he actually won, because then they didn't have to deal with him not winning. Like, they could just have him be unstoppable, and you can't face him directly.
What if there was sort of a post-apocalyptic future for the X-Men where you had like Bishop and Cable and Rachel Summers and all of that, having to just barely survive in that kind of sort of like that Terminator, future reality type of environment? Do you think there's any interest in a franchise like that?
That was Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past.
I like Rachel Summers, and I wouldn't mind having her be a starting point for an X-Men series. Like, if she came back in time and the X-Men were dissolved, and she's like, wait, that's not how history works. Like, everything's different, and she gets the X-Men back together. Like, Jean Grey's dead because Jean Grey was dead when she showed up, and then she finds Scott Summers, and she's like, this doesn't make sense. My mom shouldn't be dead. Like, I'm supposed to be born. Why is time different? And then she's the one who gets the X-Men back together after some big story. That could kind of work, and then hint at the future that we missed out on. Actually, I kind of like that as a pitch now.
It's not a bad pitch. It's Terminator versus
Yeah, but it's
good.
But it's also true to the
comic.
to the comic, and that could be an interesting way of doing it, because then you can do some Phoenix stuff, but don't do it directly. You could even reference Dark Phoenix already, so you can have that as like your backdrop. Like, that happened off screen, and now we're trying to prevent this from happening again.
Well, you can also deal with you can refer to it as that's not necessarily the Dark Phoenix happened, but like an event that happened, so that you can have Rachel Summers as someone who has a much more mysterious origin, and she's there to unite them. And then later on, you find out maybe you do a movie let's say like Terminator Salvation, but good.
No, I know what you're saying, but I think we got a lot of that with Days of Future Past.
Out of the way with Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Okay.
I loved Days of Future Past. I was really excited that they did it. I thought the changes that they made sense. I don't think it was the best movie ever, but I thought I liked it overall, and I thought it was fine.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
But I don't know if I need to see that future.
That grim, dark future, that dystopian future.
I mean, because the problem with
because I'm already living it in America right now.
Well, but
All right, calm down.
like the Bryan Singer X-Men movies have always been too much a fan of like black leather, like tight suits, instead of like. Sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. But leather jumpsuits instead of like colorful things. That was one of the things Matthew Vaughn brought.
That's true. It was already so grim and dark.
Yeah,
and most of the X-Men movies have been grim and dark.
And they've always been slightly set in the future anyway, up until we did the First Class, and then that whole timeline. It was always like the near future. Right. So it was always a little dystopian future, but it's like, well, not that much has changed. And now, Old Man Logan, or whatever you want to call it, Wolverine 3, is also sort of like a grim, dark future. I'd like to see a bright and colorful X-Men movie other than First Class. Like, that is something we're missing, where like the bright and colorful isn't just the fact that they shoot lasers.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's part of the whole, like, that idea of we want to keep everything grounded, because who the hell's running around in a yellow and blue jumpsuit? Yeah, like, Nobody's going to do that in any kind of
Well,
reality.
but I thought they made it work in a certain way with like the first class uniforms. Like I'm not asking for like a full spandex look, but like the Marvel movies have done a shockingly good job of making costumes like Captain America's work okay on film. Like like the Captain America First Avengers costume was shockingly close to a Captain America costume, and yet it still didn't look that crazy on film on a person.
Right.
Like sure, you're going to have like your spandex joke at some point that isn't going to quite fit, or it's like a little too tight. But you know, like those original X-Men jumpsuits weren't spandex costumes even. They were like tunics. They were like fairly loose if you look at the actual like Kirby drawings, which is how Kirby tended to draw his stuff anyway. But like Beast thing is like he's got like loose sleeves and like
Right.
Yeah, it could work. It could work. I agree. I would like to see it lighten up a little bit. I mean, certainly, like that's obviously DC's one of their many problems is that they went way too dark. You know, and the
There's no
X-Men,
real sense of fun.
yeah, and these movies need to have fun.
Yeah.
You definitely need to have fun. I think they need to have fun. It doesn't. You know, the thing about the X-Men is there's so many characters that you can pull from that you can develop into really interesting stories if you want to. I mean, you can pull from anybody. You can mix and match and just create all sorts of teams. I mean, you can just pull names out of a hat and make a decent movie if you just write a good script and write good stories and good interactions with these characters and give them good motivations. I mean, it's really hard to screw this franchise up, in my opinion. That's like it's just so
Yeah,
it's
they've
so
done it
rich.
quite a few times.
They've done it for sure, but they've done it just because they don't pay attention to the characters.
Right, absolutely.
And that's all you have to do. You just have to pay attention to the characters.
Actually, the Mojoverse is an interesting idea that they never have done or even really thought about doing, but is a unique X-Men property that is very cool. Like, it's gross, but that would be great for a movie. Like a guy who's so fat that he has to be like held up by like a spider wheelchair and runs TV controlling mindless ones. It's the whole parody of America.
A very Tim Burton idea.
Oh, it would be great for a Tim Burton X-Men movie. Like that's
actually
pairing
not a
that
bad
actually
idea.
kind
That
of
actually
sounds really
probably
good,
really works
and that
right
can
now.
make the bright, colorful X-Men costumes kind of be
Makes
compelling.
sense. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's
you know who
that's
also would
actually
make
pretty good.
a compelling like X-Men bright, colorful look? Wes Anderson.
See, we need the Wes Anderson X-Men movie. That
Because he could be the school. Like the school almost like feels natural with the Wes
really
Anderson
does.
stare.
It does.
I don't know that I would. Yeah, I don't think that'd sell real well. I think you're going to make $1 billion on a Wes Anderson X-Men.
There's a core group of people who would love that movie, but major audiences.
You couldn't pay my wife to go see that movie.
That's right. I forget she hates Wes Anderson.
So much. Yeah, I mean, there's really weird characters, and you know, depending on the situation that you put them in, it could be really interesting. The Mojoverse for sure is fascinating, and you can do some really fun things with that.
Well, and it's surprisingly rich because you've also got Shatterstar, who is maybe Longshot's son from a different timeline.
So this is an interesting thing. You know, we've mentioned like a Tim Burton movie and a Wes Anderson movie. Do you think there should be even commitment to doing an actual connected universe with this franchise, or should you just do movies?
You know, that's an interesting question because I feel like the X-Men comics really had like a connected universe within their own books for a while in a way that other comics didn't. Like even like Spider-Man bumps into Daredevil, and that was like the Marvel pitch of like the shared universe. But like X-Men really had like sprawling stories across all their books for like a long run. Like the 90s X-Men, like you usually were okay reading one book outside of like the big crossover events, but like there would be constant references back and forth to things. Like I remember one particular scene in like Uncanny X-Men, like Archangel runs past being like, "Bobby, we need to go," and like that's it. There's no explanation of what that scene was because it was going on in the X-Men book, like the no prefix, just X-Men. And like that was just how things were, and that was kind of cool. Like this idea, like there's this big mansion, there's a lot of people living there. They have like different things going on, and people are running in and out. And they actually have missions that they're going on. The weird part was it was like a mansion for superheroes, and they didn't address the whole school thing, which no one ever did until the first X-Men movie, which is the thing that I can never get mad about the first X-Men movie for, where they're like, "Oh, it's a school. We have classrooms. We have tons of kids here." Like before that, it was just a resting place for superheroes. But the X-Men book really did that, where it was like a soap opera and there were subplots and there was really cool things. Like one of the most endearing stories for me was the death of Ilyana Rasputin, Colossus's sister.
Yeah.
And I think she's back. She might have died again, but I think she's
yeah.
back normally now. But I really like that. Like, I thought it was a really compelling story of, we had this character who started off as a little girl, like spent like a alternate time because of everything has time travel in X-Men for some
Comic
reason.
books.
Yeah. In a dimension where she became the queen of hell. And then she came back and she was a member of their teen team. And she was like de-aged.
Wow,
but still
that is like a real step down. I'm not going to lie. That is going to be a tough
What?
one to deal with. I'm
go
the
from
queen
queen
of
to hell.
hell.
Yeah.
And now I'm on a team mutant team.
No, she
Yeah,
was,
but
but her thing was that she kind of just loved it. She was like, I'm back in the human plane. I'm
Yeah,
so
exactly.
excited to be
Can
here.
you imagine running hell?
Oh,
Do you think
every day of my life I think
about
about
how
it.
difficult managing interns can be.
Yeah, but I'm not allowed to burn interns.
But then she was like de-aged, but still had this like close friendship with Kitty Pryde as she died of the legacy virus. And like, it was so heartbreaking for Colossus that he like went over to Magneto's side. Like, that the story of her dying and that issue where he dealt with that and like just couldn't handle it. Not when he quit, but like when he just like had to deal with his sister's death, and Kitty Pryde's like dealing with her death, and it was all told from Jubilee's perspective, who didn't know these people that well, but were watching everyone, and like, you know, got mad when like Iceman made a bad joke at the wrong moment because he didn't know yet, so he just like walked in and like all of that stuff. It was like this cool soap opera thing, and that people have like complimented the series for that, but it also, yeah, like. This is why TV works.
Yeah,
because
to answer your question, Addy, yeah. I think X-Men does need to be an expanded universe.
Yeah, because there's even like this, if I remember right, and I think the director James Mangold has gone back on this, but Hugh Jackman said at first that this Logan movie is not in continuity.
standalone,
with the rest of them. Like, it's an interesting concept. I mean, yes, you can have these actors repeat in certain roles if they work, but like. Maybe the answer is to do something different from the other movies, to do something different from DC and Marvel, and just embrace, like, you know what? We just want to put good stories out instead of working so hard to, like, all right, we're going to craft this
Tie it all
universe
together.
and
Yeah.
build to this big thing. But just, you know what? Like, we have the weirdness, we have the fun, but we have the darkness, and we have a wealth of characters and stories that you can pull from and adapt, and just go with good stories.
Yeah, I think like that could have worked before Marvel did the whole expanded universe thing. And now everybody kind of expects it in a comic book series.
Yeah.
Like, they know it's a comic book title. They know it's a comic universe thing. So I think like your casual moviegoer who's not a comic book fan might actually confuse them more if you have it separated. And it's like, no, this has nothing to do with the last movie that you saw these exact same actors in.
Right.
Like, I think that would just be really confusing.
Well,
for
you can
people.
still do trilogies of stories with certain casts if you wanted to, so that you can still do something with like a darker Xavier and hint at some darkness to it and reveal it a little later on
Yeah.
in the trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's still kind of like, in a way, it's a little bit closer to the Star Wars approach to the universe. Like, there are trilogies and then there's standalone movies. Now, obviously, we're so fresh into the new Star Wars universe, but there's we have the Skywalker saga, but we also have these anthology movies that can theoretically pull from anywhere. Maybe the Skywalker saga ends with this current trilogy, and then you do another trilogy, and Rey and Finn are sort of Rey and Kylo Ren are sort of the central characters for that. I'm just throwing that out
Assuming
there.
that's the way it's going, yeah.
Right, but again, like, you can still do that with these X-Men movies, but instead of having to commit to this big game plan, you get to focus on just putting out good stories.
Well, hold on. I think there's two things we're talking about here, because there's one where it's like a big game plan and like there's an end point or at least a goal point that they want to get to for one giant shared universe.
Right.
And then there's just having a shared universe. Like all the X-Men or all the Star Wars movies have a shared universe. Like there's no scenario where like Rogue One didn't happen now. Like
That's true.
it's a movie that happened. Like, and like that story has to fit somehow. But like we've already started to go off the rails with the X-Men movies. Like the time, both First Class, which already kind of retconned stuff that happened before it, and then also how like Days of Future Past had additional retcons through actual time travel.
Right.
And now like
super retcon.
well, yeah, now and the playing fast and loose with the timeline, where characters who were teenagers in the 60s are still only in their early 20s in the 80s. Like that's still going on with that series. So
but if you reboot the series, if you just say, okay, like once Logan is done, Deadpool can live all on his own.
Yeah, Deadpool doesn't matter.
Deadpool's completely
and
it's
he
so
already
wonky.
is in that scenario of like the movie is just totally separate, because Colossus is a totally different character than what we've seen in all the other appearances of Colossus. Down to him being Russian, which he wasn't in the other movies.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Oh, it's great. Best version of Superman they've ever put on TV or on screen.
So but like I think like once Logan's done, like I would just fire everybody and I would just start over. And decide what you want to do. Do you want to do trilogies? Do you want to do standalone movies? Do you want to do an expanded universe? And then just mix and match until you get the right fit for you, for what your studio wants to do with these characters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they don't need to like, if they started a new franchise, they could just start it now set in the modern day or in the quote unquote near future, and have it not completely retcon the previous movies, but just focus on new characters. And even if you're saying it's in the same universe as the original X-Men movies, those were in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's already, a decade to 15 years later anyway. So we're at the point where most of the characters wouldn't be running around anymore because they've started to get older and probably have started to settle down. You could
died.
Well, yeah, or died. So you could do your New Mutant story where, like, okay, so Cyclops we saw dead on screen already, so we don't need to do a movie. We don't need to say where he is. Like, he could just not be around. So he might have retired, or he might have died in X-Men 3. Like, Jean Grey might have died in X-Men 3, or maybe she didn't, but she's not like in the main storyline right now. And you could do your rich, huge number of X-Men characters that have existed in other media, and have a story about these characters. And just, you might have to like find a Storm or someone to be like the teacher at the school or something like that. But even then you don't need to. You could have like a different teacher. You could have Banshee be the teacher of Generation X. And like no one's going to really have too many questions about that.
Emma. Yeah.
Yeah, or Emma. Like those two could be the one. Although Emma's been established a bit more than... Well, no, I take it back. Banshee was in First Class too.
Right.
But it could be anyone. Like you could just have teacher, like any older X-Men character... is the teacher. Colossus could be CGI and thus could live forever for these movies. So we don't need to worry about the actor. And then just, roll on from that.
Yeah, that could work.
Well, let us know what you think. Do you have any ideas for the X-Men universe? What would you like to see? What characters, what villains, what plots, what events do you want to see in an X-Men movie universe, or, just series of movies? Let us know what you think. Just go to our website, certainpov.com. While you're there, please be sure to check out Patreon if you'd like to be a part of what we're doing on the podcast. And otherwise, please feel free to share the podcast with your friends and other fellow nerds as well. All of that, again, is on our website, certainpov.com. And until next week, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Head over to certainpov.com.